Hello, and welcome to the Mayoral Candidate Forum. I'm Devin Renner, the Executive Director of the Monona East Side Business Alliance. Today's forum is hosted by Monona Community Media and the Monona East Side Business Alliance. Our moderator for today is Joy Cardine from the League of Women Voters. Your candidates for mayor are Mary O'Connor and Christy Goforth. We ask that you please mute your microphone when you're not speaking to ensure the candidate who is speaking will not have any interruptions. And now I'll hand it over to Joy Cardine to get the forum underway.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be your moderator today for this Monona Mayoral Candidate Forum featuring the two candidates running for Monona Mayor on the April 6th ballot, the incumbent mayor, Mary O'Connor, and Alder Christy Goforth. We have an hour and a half for the candidates to answer questions that were submitted ahead of time by the community. Some have been slightly edited for brevity, clarity, and fairness, so both candidates can address the issue being raised. We are not able to take questions live from the audience watching on YouTube. Let me briefly remind you of the rules that are in place for this forum. You will have a minute and a half to answer each question. Our timekeeper will give you cues and let you know when time is up. Please honor these time limits and don't make us use the mute button. I will jump in if you don't notice and there is a stop signal. Please answer the question asked and do not reference the other candidate in your answers. No personal attacks. I will alternate the order of which candidate answers a question first and last. You will also have a minute and a half for opening statements and closing remarks. The order was randomly selected. Candidate Mary O'Connor, you are first. You have a minute and a half for your opening statement.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Monona Community Media and the League of Women Voters for giving Monona residents the opportunity to learn about this year's candidates for mayor. I have been Monona's mayor for the past 4 years and was a member of the City Council for 5 years before that. I've also served in many volunteer positions in Monona, including as president of the Library Board, on the boards of the Library Foundation and Friends, the Education Foundation, and on many school district committees. I'm a librarian by training and have bachelor's and master's degrees from UW-Madison. All of those experiences, both volunteer and as an elected official, have helped me come to know the priorities of the people of Monona and broaden my knowledge and understanding of the role of city government and how it works. Being mayor is not an easy job. That experience is vital. I'm proud of what we've accomplished during my time as mayor. Construction of the riverfront redevelopment, the purchase of San Damiano, and a strategic plan for safer walking and biking. I'm leading the city's ongoing efforts related to diversity and inclusion. I've worked hard to make city government more transparent and expand the ways we communicate with residents. I restructured our committee appointment process to be more inclusive and engage more people. I feel strongly that Monona residents who want to get involved should have an opportunity to do so, and that people can easily find the information they need. I have a reputation for being a good listener and have strong organizational skills. I very much enjoy working every day on behalf of the residents of Monona, and I would like to continue to do so in a third term as mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Christy Goforth, your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much to everyone for being here. Thank you for Joy for moderating. This is an important moment for Monona, not in our history, but for our future. You have the rare opportunity to choose new leadership that brings a unique perspective forward. I'm a mom with kids in the district. I grew up in poverty. I know what it's like to live with less. I'm a member of the Sioux tribe of Chippewa Indians. I'm a communicator that embraces proactive, collaborative leadership. And I know how to use the tech tools to give us better communication and better efficiencies in our city. I can see all of the places in our community where we can blossom. There is so much unrealized potential here. I bring a breadth of leadership experience over 20 years. My leadership experience is in Monona and beyond. I was brought here to run the Monona East Side Business Alliance, formerly known as the Monona Chamber of Commerce, and I did that for 5.5 years. I owned a graphic design and video production company for 10 years, and I've run 3 nonprofit organizations. I've stepped into public service because I have the skills and the passion to make our community better for all of us. Unfortunately, we've become comfortable with a small group of people leading our community for a very long time. A lack of vision a lack of planning, fiscal mismanagement, a lack of communication, and ethical concerns have called me to step up and give you a different option. If you would like to see my vision and read about my plan, I encourage you to go to my website at goforthmonona.com. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question will go to Mary O'Connor first. What inspired you to run for the office?
Well, I have a lot of experience, as I just mentioned, with all kinds of aspects of life in Monona. And when I was on the library board, I got to know how the city works and understands all the ins and outs. And I just wanted to be more involved. So I did some research. I had a lot of people reach out to me and ask me if I'd be interested in running because they knew that I had a good experience with the city. And that's why I decided to run for city council to begin with. Then after 5 years of being on the council, where it really takes a while to get to know how the budget works and all those kind of things, but I felt that I was experienced, had gained that experience, and former Mayor Bob Miller decided that he wasn't going to run for another term. Several people reached out to me and asked me if I would consider running, and I'd been thinking about doing it, and I just felt that I could bring that experience to bear in working as mayor. So I was elected 4 years ago as mayor, and since then I have been involved in all kinds of projects that Monona has been working on, and I've really enjoyed working with the city and getting to know the staff. And I think I have a lot of great experience that I can bring to bear, and I have a lot of things that I would like to continue to work on and finish in another term. So thank you.
Thank you. Christy, go forth.
I realize that leadership is not for the faint of heart, and doing this job is definitely challenging. But I think it would be so fun to govern this city. Like I said, we have so much unrealized potential here. The moment I realized I had to run, it wasn't really a choice. It was, if you roll back to September, when Mr. Elliot Johnson killed himself after a police pursuit near Walmart. And I watched the rumors unfolding on social media. I know how social media works. I've been a social media manager for many years. And a spark can become a wildfire so quickly. And I saw the rumors that were happening. I watched the protests that happened as a result in the parking lot of City Hall. They streamed live on Facebook for the whole world to see. Nobody went out and spoke to them. And I understand if you're not comfortable speaking to diverse groups, you can always delegate someone who is, but no one was delegated. And I had real concerns that night for our business community, and that Monona Drive and Broadway would never look the same again because of a lack of leadership in this community. And it was at that moment when I realized we are at risk with someone who does not know how to lead during times of social injustice. I know how to communicate with diverse groups. I'm a member of a diverse group. And like I said, this wasn't a choice. I felt like this is something I had to do, and I'm being called to do this.
The next question, and Christy will be first. Please explain your leadership style and how you deal with a different view than your own.
Yes, my leadership style is one of a high level of communication and transparency. I require feedback and input from my stakeholders to guide my decision making. I believe in empowering my staff and giving them the tools to make their jobs easier, and so they can do the best jobs possible. I lead with empathy and compassion and humility. I grew up with less. I grew up with a single mom who dropped out of high school at age 16. I had dreams and hopes of someday being able to attend college, and I didn't know if those dreams would ever be possible. But fortunately, by the time I was 22, I was able to make that possible. I worked my way through college. In all of that, I learned resiliency, and my humble spirit will always remain no matter what position I take. This is not about me. This is about us. And that's how I lead. I require feedback from the public. I require input to make this the best community possible for all of us. And that's how I would lead as mayor of Monona.
You're next, Mary.
Okay, well, I think I'm known for having a very collaborative leadership style. I work very closely with the city staff, with the city council, the city committees, which are made up for the most part of Monona residents, to try to achieve some of what we've decided to prioritize in Monona. I think it's very important that everyone knows their roles in the city when they're involved in city government. The administration and the mayor oversee what's happening in government, but we have a city staff, which is excellent, and we have to allow them to do their jobs. The city council sets the priorities and the policies that we will then follow. And we always are asking for input from our residents. As I said, we have over 20 city committees, all of whom meet and discuss any policy or any budget item that will be coming before the council for a decision. So I like to get input from all of those people before I make a decision as to what I'm going to budget or how we should handle a particular project. And I think it's very important to listen to everyone else and to trust other people that they will do what they say they are going to do, and that we have all worked together to come to an agreement about how we're going to approach something. Thank you.
The next question is, how have you shown leadership to our community this past year during COVID? And Mary O'Connor starts.
Well, the COVID challenge has been really something. There have been several steps I've taken over the course of the past year. The city administrator and I have worked very closely on things like staffing, whether or not staff should be working from home. We've had to make sure that we have adequate PPE and supplies for all of our public safety people. We've had frequent status meetings to make those decisions. We've had frequent meetings to discuss the city's response to the county's public health orders, which we are required to follow. Those have resulted in things like basically closing City Hall for a period of time. We decided not to open the pool this year. I've attended frequent staff meetings to speak with them about COVID and answer their questions about city policy. We also had to determine how to hold city meetings safely. And we had to make sure that updates from the county about the COVID requirements were posted on the city website and that people in Monona were aware of them. So we did that in a variety of ways. I taped announcements for WVMO. I was interviewed about it in various places. We put articles in the newspaper and on the website. And I also was in a video about COVID safety. And then later on in the year, we had to make decisions about how to handle our city revenue shortfalls because it really affected our budget really harshly. And we had to make decisions about that for 2021.
Christy, go forth.
Yes, since I was elected last year, I have issued regular email updates through my website to keep people informed what's happening in the city. I hosted the first Monona Pride Ride, as it was a bicycle ride to celebrate people with different perspectives and bring people with differences together. Because sometimes when you're different, you can feel left out of your community. It was something I was really proud of. We had about 60 people participate. I've initiated a conversation that we have more of our committee meetings publicized on YouTube. It's very easy to do right now, and it's a great time for us to increase our public engagement and transparency. Probably the thing I was most proud of, though, is a conversation I had with Dane County Emergency Management. And I asked them, what should I as an alder be doing right now to advocate for my community and make sure we are not left out in the process of vaccinations? And they told me, what you need to do is contact your business community, get vaccine sites set up. And as someone who's run our Chamber of Commerce and has excellent relationships with the business community, that was very easy for me to do. It took me about an hour. And I strategically asked the East Side Club, a North Side site on the bus line, Buck and Honey's, a South Side site on the bus line, and Monona United Methodist, if they would all be open to that idea, if and when that possibility comes, because when it does come, we need to be ready to jump. Unfortunately, I was publicly attacked for doing so.
Thank you. Your time is up, Alder. So let's, the next question goes to you first, Alder Goforth, and it is, what is the biggest single biggest challenge facing Monona today?
Oh boy, we have several. It's absolutely the pandemic for sure, and making sure we get vaccinations out there. We have a lot of people hurting in our community. A couple weeks ago, we received an email from a woman she's going hungry, and she lives in our community. She cannot get her unemployment insurance. She cannot. She's looking. She was reaching out to us looking for help. Unfortunately, we have a lot of debt as a city, and so we had nothing, no way we could help her. We had to send her resources to the county and the state so she could step in line with hundreds or if not thousands of other people and look for help. All I was able to help her with was offering to bring her a bag of groceries. We have a lot of debt in our city, and so a lot of these issues are intertwined. We need to have a COVID task force set up with our business community, government officials, residents who are engaged and want to participate, so we can discuss what it's going to look like when we reopen. I think so. I guess my answer is twofold. It's both the pandemic and our finances because they are tied together.
And Mary O'Connor, you're next.
I would agree that the number one issue facing Monona is getting back on our feet after the pandemic. In the past year, it's really hit city services and our city budget. We've budgeted very carefully this year so that we should be able to handle that, but we have a lot of services that we haven't been able to provide. And I'm looking forward to being able to open the pool, have some park and rec programs, have the library open, but those are all going to be small steps that we're going to take. It isn't going to happen overnight. So it's very important. Certainly the city financial situation is important. We've taken a lot of steps this year to really cut back. We had a 0% increase in city expenditures over 2020, which was in the budget that was approved. And I think I just want to be very cautious with that going forward and see what the year brings. We think that things are going to be better this year, but it's going to be, time will tell, I guess. But I think that things look like it's turning the corner. Our other thing that one of our biggest issues facing us is dealing with the state levy limits and how we handle our budgeting. And that has been an ongoing situation, and we've worked very hard on that. We have a great fund balance in the city. We've got a terrific AA+ bond rating due to the good way that we've handled the city budget. So I feel confident going forward that we're going to be able to handle this. Thank you.
Mary O'Connor, we'll start with this next question. What is the single greatest opportunity for Monona?
I think, the opportunity is probably one of them anyway, would be the San Damiano purchase. That's something that is just going to make such a difference for our community. It's going to add green space. As we've seen this year, so many people wanted to get out and about with the pandemic and they were limited to doing anything else. So the number of people walking and biking and enjoying the parks in Monona is just expanded exponentially. And I think that's going to continue after the pandemic is over. So I think that is a great opportunity for us to expand our green space. We'll be closing on that in June. And then we really want our residents to come out and experience San Damiano and see what everybody's been talking about, because most people have not been on that property before. And it's very different when you actually are on the property as opposed to just driving by from Monona Drive. So I think that's a great opportunity for our city going forward. We have a lot of other opportunities for Monona. We've got some redevelopment opportunities that are coming on board. We've been working on those, and those will be coming to the Plan Commission in coming weeks. And I think we're certainly looking at slowly. We've been working on redeveloping all along the Broadway corridor, and we're almost done with the redevelopment project. And now we're going to be going on to the next step.
Christy, go forth.
Yeah, I would say I see two large opportunities, and one would be Southtown, the other would be San Damiano. I think San Damiano is both an opportunity and a big challenge. We've never had a park the size of San Damiano. It is a once in a lifetime opportunity, but it is a very big undertaking, and we have to make sure we can do this right. Under my opponent's leadership, we developed a new park called Grand Crossing, a smallest park in the system, and it started out being budgeted at $500,000. Then it went up to $900,000, and it topped out at $1.9 million. So we have to do this right because San Damiano is much bigger than Grand Crossing. We've not yet budgeted for park maintenance, protection of the historic home, or extra policing we might need at that site. So we have some big challenges to tackle there. I want to see us start public engagement immediately. The mayor has said that someone has committed $50,000 in fundraising. That's enough to start public engagement. We could start public engagement with $5,000. I don't know what we're waiting for. If we wait until June 1st to start this, we're just going to see our money disappear and our maintenance costs increase, vandalism at the home potentially, and we really need to take proactive leadership to get on this. So this does become one of the biggest opportunities for Monona, not one of the biggest challenges.
Share an example of when you worked with council colleagues to accomplish a goal. What was it, and how did you go about accomplishing it? Christy, go forth first.
Yeah, I guess I will say I haven't been on council very long. It's been a somewhat difficult time to be on council because it's been 100% virtual environment. We've not met in person once. I would say it's probably been the trying to promote our public meetings being made public. We currently have all of our meetings happening on Zoom. It's an excellent opportunity to let people watch at their convenience if we make them public. We have some really big budget committees that are taking place, like public safety and parks and our library. And I think people would really love having an opportunity to engage. And so I have been trying to work with council on this. Unfortunately, although they'll say that they want transparency, they want to see a public policy that exists on public meetings. And I have reached out to Madison and I asked for their policy, and their response was, there is no policy because public meetings are public. And that's just how it works. And so as someone who's owned a video production company for 10 years, all this will take is a tripod with a phone on it and set in the corner and someone to press start. And then we upload that to YouTube. It's really very simple. And I think we could start this immediately to increase engagement in our community and accommodate those like healthcare workers or waitresses who can't attend our meetings around our schedule.
Thank you. Mary O'Connor.
Well, one good example is when I worked with Alders Doug Wood and former Alder Chad Spate and current Alder Jennifer Coor on a bicycle pedestrian improvement plan. That was an 18-month process. A lot of residents are very concerned about walking and biking safely in Monona. So I appointed an ad hoc citizen committee with a charge to determine safe routes to community destinations, which the two alders chaired and co-chaired. And almost every decision we make starts with input from a citizen committee. So we put funding in the capital budget for an engineering consultant to work with the committee, which met for over a year. They met with the consultants, they met with the public works and public safety committees, they had public input sessions, and then they generated a report with recommendations. I attended most of those meetings and provided my input on that. It was their concerns as well. Then I worked with Alders Coor and Wood to put together a PowerPoint presentation about the plan and what it would mean for Monona when it was presented to the city council, and the council accepted the plan, and we are now implementing various pieces of it. I think a great example is the sidewalk that we constructed on McKenna Road as part of that project last year. It's exactly what we're talking about in terms of safe routes to community destinations. Students can walk over to Dean Avenue on streets that aren't as heavily traveled. They can cross Dean, and then they can get onto McKenna Road to walk almost the entire way to Winnequa School from there. So it's a great example of what we were talking about with that committee.
Aside from the methods the city is currently communicating with residents, for example, e-newsletter, radio, TV, YouTube, website, various social media, what other ideas do you have for improving communication, Mary O'Connor?
Well, there's other things we can do. We also have a city and semi-annual guide that I write a column in. We continue doing that. I have continued Bob Miller's tradition of periodically holding office hours at the farmers market, and could expand that to outside of the farmers market season to find a place to hold office hours. The mayor doesn't actually have an office in City Hall, so that gets to be kind of a challenge when people want to meet with me. We can have an Ask the Mayor segment on WVMO. I have about 8 or 10 months ago started doing interviews after every council meeting to update people on what's happening in the city and what happened at the most recent council meeting. And I can continue to that, but we can expand it because that's what WVMO is designed for, public input, and it's supposed to be a local radio station. So we want to be sure that we have mainly local news there. We can also film periodic interviews about important city issues to broadcast on the city YouTube channel. So those are all different ways that we can do it. We're trying really hard to expand our communications within the city. We've had I funded a communications plan a couple of years ago, and we've been just completing the various pieces of that. But there's definitely more to do.
Thank you. Christy, go forth.
Thank you. This is one of our biggest challenges. And, it's really exciting because one of the trends in government leadership is communicators are stepping up because communication is of critical importance. We definitely need to stop talking to our residents and start talking with them and having two-way communication. All the tools are there, like the mayor said. We have a YouTube channel. We have numerous social media channels. We have a radio station. We have a local newspaper. We just need a comprehensive strategy to use them more effectively. I think there are so many tech tools available right now. Community.com is one that I would love to look into, where we can possibly even set up a feedback line at City Hall with prompts so you can tell us your problems there. We could have QR codes on our agendas so people can easily find things because right now that's a challenge. Our website is challenging to use. We do need to overhaul our website a little bit. It's actually some very simple fixes. I've built hundreds of websites myself, so I feel like I have a good handle on that. We need to get more committee meetings on YouTube so people know what's going on. They are hungry for information. We could have a call-in section at city council meetings. Organizations, cities across America are doing this. We can lead the way in the communication outreach and set the bar high. As a small city, we have so many opportunities to do that.
You touched on it, but do you feel committee meetings should be recorded and made accessible to Monona citizens through YouTube or some other mechanism, and why or why not?
Assume that goes to me?
No, that goes to Christy.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've hit on this a couple of times. It is something I feel passionate about because there are a lot of people in our community whose voices are being left out. There are healthcare workers that don't work around our schedule, or they're working class who also don't work around our schedule, and they can't see what's happening. And I know I keep hearing that, this is going to be very costly for us. But you know what, we're talking about at City Hall right now about amending our budget to add 2 B-cycle stations this year for $23,000. And as someone who owned a video production company for 10 years, this could be so simple. And I'm struggling to figure out the challenges. We obviously have money in the budget if we're prioritizing B-cycle over transparency and communication with our people. And I've realized this will be a shift for people that have been on committees for 10 years, 20 years, that haven't had those meetings available on YouTube. But it's time. People want to know what's happening in their local government. And right now, it's the perfect time to do it because we're all virtual. It's so easy. And I think we could probably find a volunteer on every one of those committees to hit the start button on the phone that sits on the tripod in the corner, because that's all it really takes.
Thank you. And I apologize, Mary O'Connor, now your turn.
Okay. Well, I think I have said at council meetings that I support making our Zoom meetings available on YouTube. I think the question comes in as to what happens when we are no longer on Zoom. And I'd also like to just point out that right now, the community can call in to our Zoom meetings to express their opinions during our public appearance section, or they appear on the Zoom meeting. All those meetings are open to the public. We also have minutes from every meeting that have always been available to the public. And we've always put the city council, the plan commission, and finance and personnel meetings have always been available on the YouTube channel. I think the problem comes in once we go to a hybrid version of meetings where some people are there in person, some people are there in Zoom. It's more complicated than just putting a phone on a tripod in a corner. We're not sure how you meld those two pieces of technology together to then later have them appear on YouTube. I'm sure we can find a volunteer to press a button to start taping a Zoom meeting, but the question is, after we go to hybrid meetings and whatever, we require staff to film, to take the videotaped meetings and make sure they're out on YouTube. And right now, we only have funding for staff to do that for those meetings that are already taped. And we do not always have great equipment at any meetings outside of the municipal room either. So there's a lot of questions to be developed going forward with that.
Mary O'Connor, you will be first answering this question. Monona is a very environmentally responsible city. Since being elected, what have been some of your most important contributions to the sustainability of our city and our lake?
Well, when I was elected as an alderperson, I served as the chair of the Sustainability Committee for several years. And during that time, we actually developed our sustainability plan, which we are currently using as a blueprint for our sustainability efforts, for at least some of them. That's also the time when we negotiated to put all the solar panels on the city buildings, which have made a big difference in our city operating expenses. I recently, about several months ago, supported a resolution pledging to work towards a long-term goal of using 100% renewable energy for city operations. I have funded hybrid and electric vehicles in the city budget. I've also supported installing LED lights in many city buildings, which are saving us a lot of money and a lot of energy use over time. In addition, things like our Adopt a Storm Drain program, which keeps leaves and debris out of the lake. That's something little, but it can make a huge difference. I have funded stormwater projects to help keep the lake clean and prevent phosphorus from getting into the lakes. I arranged for bi-weekly lake weed pickup during the summer months 2 summers ago, and that's helping keep our lakes clean. We also have a Monona Sustainable Business Initiative. And so there's lots of different things we can do. And in terms of sustainability, we've funded working with the Madison project to try to build people's interest in bringing solar to their homes in Monona. But there's also a lot of little things that can be done too that are up to people just on their own.
Thank you. Christy, go forth.
Well, the question's a little bit tricky because I've not led the city or been involved with the city for the past 9 years. And so while I can't talk a lot about what I've done while I've been at the city, I can talk about my personal values. I lead a zero waste lifestyle. The environment as a Native American woman is deep within my soul. I am one with the environment, and that's how I lead my life. I've personally adopted 3 storm drains. My son and I love cleaning out those storm drains. And we love talking to people who walk by and who thank us for doing that and help educate them. I think we could promote that more widely in the city. We certainly need to promote our public transit. I've talked with, not just promote, but also expand. As a city that takes pride in its sustainability, we need to make that a priority. I talked to a resident who moved here because she loved our sustainable reputation. But then lo and behold, she realized she had never owned a car, and she realized now to live here, she had to buy a car to get to work because she doesn't work on campus or at the hospitals, the only locations where our buses go. So I think we also need to work on our LED lighting throughout the city and making sure that those are smart lighting and they have sensors so we can individually control all of those and we can work toward being a smart city. I think when we think about the new public safety building, we have to definitely take sustainability into consideration and think about, oops, I'm sorry, I see the time limit.
Thank you. And you will continue first, Christy, with this question. In 2019, The City Council passed a 100% renewable energy resolution. What actions will you take to ensure that the city gets on track to meet its 2025 and 2030 goals? Reduce city energy use by 15% by 2030, and community-wide energy use by 10% by 2030, meet 35% of city electric needs with renewable energy by 2025, 100% by 2030, and meet 35% community-wide electric needs with renewable energy by 2025 and 50% by 2030. Sorry for all those numbers, but what will you do to ensure that the city gets on track to meet those goals?
Absolutely. It's of critical importance. Like we said, the LED lighting, it seems like a small measure, but it's really important. It can add up really quickly. Promoting and encouraging the use of solar panels wherever we can. Unfortunately, right now, the only people that can afford those are people of means. And so maybe we can expand some programming and allow for more funding. But that does require us getting our fiscal house in order. I think we need to aggressively work toward our lake health and make sure we're working closely with the county and the state. I think there are opportunities with the county and the state to achieve these goals, and that's going to be important that we collaborate with them. Once again, the public transit, we need to be a part of that. And maybe we look at some new trends with transit. There are trends in Europe where the transit is almost like a hybrid between Uber and public transit. So instead of having our buses running loops around and around and maybe having one or two riders, we use a program where it has some software and they can call and get a pickup when they need to, kind of expanding our Monona Lift program, but to everybody. I think as we think about the new public safety building, that needs to be a priority. That's something that definitely comes into this, and we have to make sure we're embracing all of the new tech tools to make sure that building is as sustainable as possible.
Thank you. Mary O'Connor.
Well, this is a big goal, and it's going to take a lot of work to achieve it in such a short period of time. I think we've already are at between 20 and 25%, but we have a long way to go. We have just started the last few years. We've been experimenting with some hybrid police vehicles. We're going to continue doing that because I think those have worked out pretty well. As I said, we have already installed LED lights in city buildings. We are going to be working with MG&E to install them in street lights, but that's going to be something that takes place over a period of time. It's not something the city can just do. In terms of mass transit, it would be wonderful to expand our bus system. We've met with the city of Madison about that. In order to expand it by going with them, it would cost us hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars more than we have right now for that effort. So currently, I think our system is fairly efficient. We have 3 routes downtown into the hospitals in the morning and in the afternoon. Of course, all this is dependent on the pandemic being over because right now we hardly have any riders on the bus. We've made a lot of HVAC improvements at the City Hall and the library, and there are more to come. Those have been ongoing issues in terms of being inefficient, and they're just old buildings. That's part of our problem here is our infrastructure is old. Some of it's 60 years old and it needs to be updated. And obviously a new public safety building, making that energy efficient will be a number one priority. We may even look at geothermal heating. I don't know. We need to look. There's a lot of different options for that.
Thank you. Your time is up. Mary O'Connor, you're first on this question. How will you ensure that the city is developing resiliency strategies to deal with the anticipated effects of climate change and more severe weather?
Well, one thing we're doing in our public works projects is we're certainly expanding how we view what is needed. When we did the Bridge Road project a year or two ago as part of the riverfront redevelopment, I know we planned for a 100-year flood in terms of the storm drains, then the water and sewage systems that were put in there. And I think that's something that every community is going to have to do because, as you know, we've had flooding issues. I think we've had 100-year floods 2 or 3 times in the last 10 to 15 years in Monona. We also, a good example is our stormwater system. We at one point had I don't know, like 8 of the 10 worst stormwater outfalls in Dane County were in Monona, and we've gotten county grants, and we've worked to improve those so they can handle more stormwater and keep so much refuse from going into the lake when we have storms. And we're doing things we've done a lot already down in the Belle Isle area to improve what flooding is going to be there. But basically every single public works project is going to have to take that into account going forward, because times are changing and we just cannot continue to rest on what previous practice has been. I mean, we were seeing that in terms of even talking about the amount of salt and sand we buy for snow plowing during the winter, because this winter's been a little unusual, but the amount of snow that we get during the winter has been changing. So we really have to look at all aspects.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Go forth.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of this is the interplay between our finances and these questions is big. And so we really, once we get our finances under control, then we can take better measures in all of these areas. Stormwater is of utmost importance, of course, for us. And I think when I think of the drainage basin at the north end of San Damiano, when that was put in, that was seen as very high tech, but it's kind of become an eyesore and it's a little bit smelly. And so we need to work on embracing the new underground stormwater management systems, but those are a little more costly. And so we do have to get our finances in order so we can prioritize those. We also, 100-year floods are becoming common occurrence, and we're hearing about the 500-year floods now. I did take a look at our emergency operating plan on the city's website, and it hasn't been updated since 2014. I counted about 8 emergency contacts there that are outdated, and there's hardly any mention of social media communication crisis planning. So updating our emergency operating plan is really important. Unfortunately, it's not been done, and that's something we really have to prioritize because that plays into the safety of our community and definitely in the flooding.
Next question. Parking is a big issue for renters within the city. What are your plans to support sufficient parking options for residents? Christy, go forth. Yes,
this is a big issue. This is one where, I had parking issues on my street 5 years ago, and I've lived here 6 years now, 7 years. And a parking ordinance was being put in on our street, and the residents we really hadn't been communicated with. And so I live on a street that has a lot of overflow commercial parking. And we were getting, our street was being opened up to the students that park for Monona Grove High School as well. And myself and the neighbors were frustrated, and we wanted to have the parking ordinance reviewed because we didn't have any opportunity for engagement or input. So 8 of us rallied ourselves together and went down to the community center building, and we talked and pled our case. And the first question, or the first response after we spoke was, so when do the new signs go in? And so we weren't heard. And so I share the frustrations, and I know there are a lot of frustrations right now because a bunch of parking ordinances went in here over the last few months. One of those was from a resident that lives in an apartment just down the street from me. And the parking ordinance that was put in around her apartment building required her to walk a mile in a snow emergency because there's not adequate parking, and that parking ordinance was put in. And when I'm on the city council, I was the only one to vote against that parking ordinance because I saw that other residents experienced what I experienced, a lack of engagement and opportunity for feedback and input.
Thank you. Mary O'Connor.
Related to the resident in the apartment building that Christy mentioned, I know that our city administrator has been working with her and making some changes to make some options for parking available to her. Part of the issue with the parking around the apartments in the city is a lot of them around Monona Drive, and we also have issues with students from Monona Grove High School parking in those neighborhoods because there's not enough parking in the school properties. So in order to, and a lot of those streets are fairly narrow, so we've had to restrict parking to one side of the street or the other to enable city public works trucks, garbage trucks to come through and provide city services, while at the same time allowing some kind of parking for those students and for the residents who live there. It's a tough problem. so far as I know, every time an ordinance about parking has come up before the Public Works Committee, all of the affected residents are sent letters and notified. Now, not everyone may have seen those letters, but we do hear from people in response to those letters. We do not make decisions like that without having input from residents, but we also have to understand that sometimes one or two residents may be very upset about something, but everyone else is fine. So we have to kind of strike a balance between what is needed for both our employees to be able to do their jobs, for people who are temporarily in those areas to be able to park, and for the residents to park as well. And it's complicated. It is, but
Thank you. Next question. What specific actions have you taken to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive city for all residents? Mary O'Connor, you're first.
Okay, well, this is something that I'm very proud of our efforts in this area so far, and we've definitely still have ways to go. But after the incident on Arrowhead Drive last year, we pledged to do 5 things. We did an investigation and we looked at our police policies and procedures. But the other thing we did was pledging to hire somebody to work with us to conduct community conversations. And we have started that effort with the Nehemiah Urban Leadership Development Corporation. But there's a long way to go. We are doing our best to, as mayor, I have restructured our city committee process in order to allow for more diversity on our city committees. Diversity is an important issue to me. I'm the first woman mayor, so I think I have a stake in this too, as does our council. We can lead by example at City Hall. We're working to use a greater variety of ways of outlets to post our job openings, which we hope will lead to increased diversity in city staff. We're having ongoing training sessions for city staff. And once a new police chief comes in, police have had some training in the recent months, but one of his or her charges will be to come up with a plan for that. So I think, there's a long way going forward. We are recently just proposed Equity and Inclusion Committee to help an ad hoc committee to come up with a plan to make sure that we keep our.
Thank you. Thank you. Christy, go forth.
Yeah, this is obviously an issue that directly impacts me and is really important. I'm happy to see that the city is finally taking some measures and strides in this direction. And I do give my colleagues and my opponent grace in that they are starting this journey. And I am glad they are starting to embark on this journey and making it a priority. Dr. Alex G. had a newspaper article published on February 26th, and he talked about, they asked him, what was the main problem with Madison leadership and why is it such a struggle for us to move forward in this direction? And this is going to be hard to hear, but he answered that the main problem is white liberals. And we have this playing out right now in our community with this ad hoc work group, because as the only elected official, non-white elected official in the history of Monona, I have not been invited to participate in this group. And what we're asking as a diverse community is that the white people who've had their hands on the controls for all of time simply let go and let us take the controls. Those of us who know how to drive the bus. If you haven't learned to drive yet, you can't drive this machine, right? We need you to be passengers on the bus because it's critical. You hold all the power and control. You control our housing, our healthcare, our finance. And so we need your partnership. And we hope you'll let us guide the way.
We have a related question next, and Christy, go forth. You will start. What specific actions have you taken to educate yourself personally in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I think no matter how many books or trainings that you partake in, nothing compares to lived experience. And as a woman who grew up in a community that didn't appreciate Native people, and even in a country that tried to eradicate my ancestors, I think that experience speaks volumes. Sports saved my life. And unfortunately, I had to wear a logo of my team, the Detour Red Raiders. And I had enormous amounts of shame about my race growing up. I was teased on the playground often for having to get my dental and health services through my tribal clinic. I won't allow people to shame me for that anymore. And unfortunately, I think it was at the June 15th council meeting, the mayor hurled a race card right in my face when we were discussing that 48% of our police stops involve Black Americans in our community, despite the US Census data saying that 99 Black people live in our community. And I was asking why, and I was asking questions. And she said, so should we allow the police to stop Native Americans? And fortunately, our community is filled with wonderful people who reached out to me with concerns and apologized on her behalf. You know, I've experienced far worse, but it was a moment of shame, not for my race, but for our leadership.
Mary O'Connor.
First of all, I would address that last comment. That came up in the context of Alder Goforth asking if we can just instruct our police officers not to stop Black drivers or people who they think are speeding or determined are speeding. And I said, well, should we also make that a rule for Native American as well? It was not throwing a race card, it was a question. And it's something we legally cannot do. I have spent a lot of time in terms of what I'm doing to educate myself. I have always kept up on current events in the news. And so I've obviously, with everything that's happened in the last year, I've been reading a lot about issues of bias. I've talked to a lot of people in the community of all color regarding these issues, listened to their input and suggestions. That's what's led to this ad hoc committee that we have only proposed. The reason Alder Goforth hasn't been appointed to it is because no one's been appointed to it. This council has not approved the committee yet. I continue to read and watch news and documentaries around the topic and discuss it with neighbors and Monona residents. The city administrator and I have had some executive training sessions with Dr. Alex G. of Nehemiah that we found very useful in terms of how to expand diversity and inclusiveness in Monona. And we also have participated in some staff trainings, and there will be more of those coming forward. There's a lot to do, but I am continuing to talk to people and to educate myself and to learn more so that I can do the best job for Monona.
Mary O'Connor, you will start this question. How has the pandemic changed your thinking regarding serving all citizens of Monona?
Well, I think it's become very obvious that it's hard for us to provide services for the city of Monona, for the people of Monona in a pandemic. For instance, our senior center provides, I think a lot of people aren't aware of the types of social services, help that they provide people. We contract with another organization to help with some of that, but a lot of the seniors, they've made programs available via Zoom, but a lot of them don't have computer access. So we've become very aware of the needs of the seniors and worked with the director of the senior center. She's really reached out to the senior citizens to make sure that they know that there are ways that we can help them, that they can phone call or whatever. In terms of, I think our public safety services, that's been an issue because no matter what the police do or the fire, they have had to be very careful and make sure that they are wearing PPE and that they're not contaminating other people or other people aren't contaminating them. It's made a big difference in the number of stops we've been having for speeding and things like that, at least going forward. We also had to make some restrictions in terms of parks and recreation services. We weren't able to open the pool. So it's made a huge difference in life as we know it in Monona for a lot of people. And, I'm hoping that eventually we can get back to normal here and go back to the way life used to be, although I don't think it's ever going to be the way it used to be. We're never going to forget this.
Christy, go forth.
Yeah, this has been a crisis of magnitude, of magnitudes we've never experienced before. And it's touched every man, woman, and child in Monona. We have a lot of people living in fear in our community, the elderly who are anxiously waiting to get their vaccination. We have a business community that's struggling and really being devastated. And we're really not able to support them. We don't have funds available to support them or people in our community who are going hungry. We have people in our community who can't buy food, or they can't pay their rent. I heard from an elderly neighbor who she paid her first installment of her property taxes and she doesn't know, she can't pay the second installment and she doesn't know what to do. I had to send her state and county resources, but the chance of her getting help is, stepping in line once again with thousands of others. So if we can get our finances in order, we can be in a better position to serve everyone in our community. That's really the sole purpose of government, is to serve our people and protect our people. And but right now we've got such a mountain of debt on top of us that our hands are tied and we can't. And that's something I'm committed to tackling. It's an enormous issue, but I've got great ideas on how we can solve these problems and meet the needs of our community in a better way.
And Christy, go forth. You will start this one, a related question from one of the community members. The pandemic has impacted us in so many ways. What have you done to help guide Monona through it?
Well, I hate to keep beating that drum, but making sure our meetings are accessible to people is really critical. They can't come to City Hall to watch them, or to the library to participate in meetings. And so this is a great opportunity for them to see what's happening and see the park projects we're spending on, and see how our public safety and our police policy review and the police chief search are all evolving. I think, my efforts in establishing potential vaccine sites was really critical. And I know my opponent was probably upset with that, because maybe she was embarrassed that she hadn't talked with Dane County Emergency Management. I asked them if anyone from Monona had reached out, and they hadn't. And other alders from other cities were streaming into their office asking exactly what I did. What can I do to advocate for my community? And unfortunately, I was publicly attacked instead of supported. And really, the others at the table should have also then done the same. But I feel really proud. That's probably the thing I'm most proud of, actually, in this last year, is just advocating. And so we are ready when the vaccine comes, and we've got businesses that want to help, want to participate in this process, and making sure that Monona is represented when the vaccines are here.
Thank you. Mary O'Connor.
Well, I would address this whole vaccine question by saying that, first of all, that is the responsibility, setting up vaccine sites, if we're asked to do so by the county, that is the responsibility of our fire chief. It's not the responsibility of a individual alder to do that. When the county heard that, when the fire chief went and heard about this proposal of Alder Goforth's and talked to the county about it, because the county has explicitly told municipalities that they do not want us setting up our own vaccine sites. So I gather there's somebody who went rogue at the county who told Alder Goforth that. But if it comes time for us to set up vaccine sites, our fire chief will take charge of that, and he will do it in a safe way. He'll do it in a way where we have city public safety crew there in case there is a problem. There are EMTs and whoever, and we can make sure that the site, it was very nice of the businesses to offer, but we need to be sure the site is uncontaminated and whatever. And so that's when that will happen. In terms of what I've done going forward is, again, our budgeting process. Yes, it would be nice if Monona could afford to provide a lot of social services, but in Dane County, that's the role of the Dane County. That is not the role of individual cities. Madison doesn't provide social services either. Dane County does that, and we refer people to those Dane County services all the time. If someone has an issue with their paying their property taxes, we are happy to work with them on that. So I hope that Alder Goforth referred them to our finance director.
Thank you. Mary O'Connor, you will start answering this question. What are 3 critical projects the city is currently involved in that you support?
Well, I think certainly one of the critical projects is the San Damiano project, and making sure that the purchase happens, and that we then, after that, we want to be sure that we allow adequate city input from our residents as we implement a master plan there. That will all be happening after the purchase is done. The reason we have not had input up to now from residents is because we're not allowed on the property. And I see no point in having city input sessions about that until we're allowed on the property, which will happen after June 1st. We do occasionally get individual approval to take individuals on who are involved in the fundraising process, but that's been about it right now. Our other big issue, continuing to address the issues of diversity and racial bias in a meaningful and lasting way, is a critical issue that we're involved in right now, and we're continuing to work on that. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. The situation took a long time to develop, but the city is chipping away at it. And the next step, I think, is this ad hoc committee that we plan to appoint to help us come up with a lasting plan for that. And then finally, it's planning for a badly needed public safety building. Our city infrastructure, some of our older buildings, they're just falling apart, and our public safety facilities are just not adequate for modern day policing or fire departments. Our fire department garage actually used to be the public works garage. It wasn't even built for fire trucks.
Thank you.
So,
Christy, go forth.
Yeah, I would say we are embarking right now on a new stormwater system at Stonebridge Park. And that's of absolute critical importance because I live near that park. And when it rains, it's like a class 3 rapids going through that park. So that project has also been covered by grants. And so it's a fantastic piece of that project. The other part of that project is an optional spending of $350,000 approximately, when a lot of neighbors and residents said, we don't really want that park redesigned. We'd like it to remain a natural meditative space, and we'd like to see San Damiano and what's going to happen there before we embark on an optional park project. And that amount of spending in a time of crisis and global pandemic seems a bit irresponsible. The other one I would say is the San Damiano, absolutely, very important, really exciting. We certainly can start public engagement immediately. We don't need access to the property. Everybody knows where that is. Everybody has seen it. Public engagement can happen digitally. It doesn't have to happen in person. And then last, I would say with the fire chief and his efforts to roll out the vaccines and get sites, my orders came directly from the Dane County Emergency Management Director. And he told every alder that streamed into his office they should be setting up potential vaccine sites with their community. So I guess the director who's charged with that went rogue.
San Damiano was a large ticket item. Can you explain why you voted to approve the purchase? And Christy, go forth this first.
Yeah, I think that happened at my very first city council meeting. So, I'll speak to our onboarding process for council members is there isn't much of one. We don't get a handbook. We don't get a manual. That was one of the few meetings I was able to have in person with my colleagues. And I went to City Hall and each director came in and I was told I could ask them any questions. But I would say that, sorry, can you repeat the question, Joy? I just want to make sure I hit the exact answer. Oh, you're on mute, but I think I got it.
Yes, can you explain why you voted to approve the purchase?
Yeah, I believe it is a once in a lifetime opportunity and it's an enormous tract of land. And I think it is important for the city to have control of that because we want to control its destiny, right? Rather than having a developer buy it and then we just kind of have to go along because a lot of our economic development plans are outdated. And we don't have a citywide economic development plan that tells developers what we want in certain areas. And so without that kind of proper planning, we really are just kind of left a little bit vulnerable as a city in making our decisions because we can't control what happens at certain properties when they're privately owned.
Thank you. Mary O'Connor.
Okay, first of all, I would just say that this decision was actually made in September, the decision to purchase San Damiano. That was 5 months after Alder Goforth came on the council. And there is an onboarding process. There's an entire packet of materials that she received regarding her role on the council. I know because I worked to design that packet a couple of years ago when I became mayor. I'm very proud of negotiating the purchase of San Damiano, which was then unanimously approved by the City Council. It's a spectacular piece of property, and it just feels much bigger than it looks from Monona Drive. And I think it's really important for people to actually get on the property before they start getting input about it, because it has just a very different feel when you're actually walking the property. Except for building a garage, it basically hasn't been touched since the 1880s. And much of it hasn't been touched since it was the site of Native American encampments there before that. So there's generations of history there. Once we close in June, we want everyone to come and experience it. And then we anticipate starting a master planning process. I think the most important thing here is that Monona will control this and will make decisions about what happens with it going forth. I know Alder Goforth has had several suggestions about developing it, but everything I'm hearing from people is that they would rather keep it as green space for Monona, which, as far as I'm concerned, I think that will be, hopefully, is a priority that we will be able to achieve. We have very few opportunities to increase our public green space, and I think we've learned the importance of parkland, especially over the past year when people weren't able to get together with people elsewhere.
The next question is related, and you touched on it. Do you have a vision, Mary O'Connor, for the San Damiano property?
I think my vision would be to keep it as green space if we can. We need to decide what we're going to do with the house. I think one thing we need to do is have a study done of that building and see if it's even something that could be restored. We're not sure. There's a lot of issues there. And we haven't really been able to get into. We've been inside of it, but we won't be able to get in and actually do an adequate study of it until after the purchase is done. But I think right now, I don't see a big rush to develop anything. I think we need to take our time. We want to do it right. I have said that as far as I'm concerned, we can put out a couple benches and some picnic tables for a year or two and let people get a feel for it. And then we can talk about what we want to do. There's some woods there. I'd like to have us cut some paths through the woods so that people can access those. We'd like to continue the community garden going forward, but we really want to hear from the people of Monona what they would like to do with it. And as we've said, the important thing is that Monona will be able to control what happens with that going forward. We also have a fundraising group that's working on that, and that's something that's going to take, for something this big, that's going to work that will take place over the next couple of years in terms of a capital project like that. So there's a lot that we need to do, but it's going to take some time.
Thank you. Christy, go forth.
Yes, I'd like to address the comment that I've proposed developing the site, because I have never once proposed that. I think my opponent doesn't quite understand what public-private partnership means. I'm a Dane County Parks Commissioner, and I'm thoroughly invested in parks and park development, and that's a huge part of our identity here in Monona. I can provide an example of public-private partnership, and one would be in Monona is called the Elder Leopold Nature Center, and that's one where the city owns the land. But Elder Leopold Nature Center maintains that property. They actually pay us. It's called pilot. It's called payment in lieu of taxes. And they pay us $15,000 to $16,000 a year to be there, and basically is provide that as parkland to us. I know I love hiking there, and it's a beautiful site. And it's also a great center for children and nature preschool. I think, another example of public-private partnership is Red Arrow Park in Milwaukee, where they have a ice skating rink exactly like ours, but Starbucks manages it, and it's worked into the plan that you rent the skates from Starbucks because Starbucks knows it's going to bring people to their ice skating rink, into their to their store, and they pay also in the contract for all of the maintenance for the park. So it ends up costing the residents nothing. And I think that's a model, while we didn't do that at Grand Crossing, I think that's a model we really could look at, because not activating that site is going to lead to some issues potentially.
What do you see as the challenges and opportunities for tourism in Monona? Christy, go forth first.
Yes. Oh, yes. The tourism economy has been devastated. And well, I know our hotels and our restaurants are struggling. Statistics say that people, after we reopen, people are saying about 30%, 7% of them are saying they're going to travel more than ever before. And so I led, when I was running Monona Eastside Business Alliance, a tourism task force with about 22 community residents and business owners and those in the tourism industry and Ho-Chunk Nation. And we developed the entire brand, foundation of the brand for Monona. And we also developed an asset list of our tourism, a tourism inventory list in partnership with the Wisconsin Department of Tourism. And so this, in effect, saved the city tens of thousands of dollars by doing this work through the community. And it was a really great project. I do have one concern here, is that one of our new hotels, and it's a hotel at our newest and biggest development, is really seeing some problems. And it's just because of a basic policy update that needs to be done. And this is not in relation to Dane County housing homeless people in hotels. And the mayor knows that this is happening. And the Monona PD has said this hotel is becoming Monona's new cesspit because there is prostitution and heroin deals and heroin usage happening at this hotel. And it's becoming a black eye for Monona. We have about 150 apartments coming online, and we don't want that development to be at risk. So it's something we absolutely have to address immediately.
Mary O'Connor.
I guess this is the first I've heard that we have a cesspit in Monona, but I think tourism in Monona is kind of complicated because we have 3 hotels, but a lot of the people who come to stay at those hotels are actually coming for events in Madison, at the Alliance Center for one, which is very close by. So there's a lot of opportunity for Monona in terms of having motels and hotels available here. And there are also a lot of opportunities then for our local restaurants and businesses to get business from those people who are coming, even if they're coming for an event in Madison. There's a state law that we have to use a certain percentage of our hotel room tax for tourism, to promote tourism in Monona. And we've appointed a tourism committee that it makes grants to different individuals who come to us with proposals for spending that money on different projects. We've worked with MESBA we have to select an organization to help us with that. And MESBA is the organization we've selected. They are in the process of finalizing a website about tourism in Monona, which the city is funding that through some of the grants from the hotel dollars. So there's a lot we can do with that money. And I think one thing we should be doing is making sure we're talking positively about businesses in Monona rather than making negative remarks about them. We don't want to drive away business. So I think if there are issues with some businesses, our police department ought to know about it.
Thank you. Thank you. In a difficult financial time and with a state high debt load compared to most other cities, why are we spending more than required by the DNR on Stonebridge Park? Mary O'Connor.
Okay, this Stonebridge issue has gotten way out of control. It's a complicated project. What's happening there is we're required to do a stormwater project about every 5 years by the DNR to help lessen the amount of phosphorus going into the lake. And the Stonebridge Stormwater Project is the first one we've selected to do. It's the easiest and the smallest, and we're going to use it as sort of a test case. We're tearing up the entire park to put in a stormwater filtration system there. And then there also will be building they'll be installing a new stormwater drain system for the water to go out into the lake once it's filtered. Since we're tearing up the entire park, we have to put it back together again. So I was on the Parks Board 6 or 7 years ago, and they were already talking about improvements at Stonebridge Park. This is the obvious time to make those improvements because the park will already be torn up already for the stormwater project, and we have to spend money to put it back together as it is. So we might as well do it all at one time. I think the main objection I've heard to it is that we're putting in an accessible path. This is something that is required by us by the ADA law that we have to do, and we really should have done it before this. So really all we're doing there is putting the park back together, putting in an accessible path, and doing something to help with the erosion around the shoreline in the park itself. And we'll also be fixing the historic pagoda that's there that's badly deteriorating and needs some help. So it's kind of a three-faceted project.
Thank you. Christy, go forth.
Yeah, the stormwater piece of the project is absolutely critical because, like I said, a lot of water flows through there and goes straight to the lake. But there is an optional park project happening, about $350,000. And it does include a walkway and a lot of hardscapes. That's going to make that more of a destination park when people appreciate it as a natural meditative space. One of the problems is that that contract for that design went out without a bid. The $40,000 was contracted for that design, and the design, it could be better. Any park design today should include 3D animation. That's very standard for today. And I think because it didn't go out for bid, we got taken. It's a top-down design, and it could be better. I think, it's a former Ho-Chunk campsite. And I think we could have enhanced that and really kind of played up on the cultural significance of that land versus scraping it down and making it very human-centric. I agree with the public sentiment that said, please don't do this at the park. Let's wait and see what happens at San Damiano. Let's see if the stormwater tank holds before the sidewalk gets washed away or before all of that work happens. We are in a pandemic, and we do not have a pandemic budget here. We do not have to spend this money right now. We could wait and see, and that would be the smarter thing to do at this point.
Thank you. This is from a community resident, not me. It appears we have a large amount of debt as a city. I'm curious as to what exactly led to this position, and what steps will you take to draw down this debt and get us into a more fiscally sound position? And Christy, go forth, you're first.
Okay. It is true. And it's one of the questions I probably hear the most is, why do we have so much debt? So you can see this graph, and that red arrow is pointing to Monona. This is the debt per capita in Dane County cities. So we are the second highest. I did some digging because I'm a researcher, and I love to get to the bottom of problems because I was curious about why we have so much debt. One of it is our overuse of TIF. Every development project we do does not need to have TIF support, but we do give that. The other one is that I found that the city is selling all of our debt to an organization called Hutchinson, Shockey and Early. And so we are doing that in a negotiated sale process instead of putting that out for competitive bid. Competitive bid allows the taxpayers to get the best rate. And from what I can see, this has been happening for about 17 years. And if you were to ask the city who our financial advisor is, they would say it's Hutchinson, Shockey and Early. But according to the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, you cannot have a broker and an advisor being the same entity. So we are carrying $50 million of debt this year. It'll be at $55 million at the end of this year, $6,850 for each man, woman, and child in Monona. And we are operating without a financial advisor. And that's been happening for 17 years. And that's due to lack of oversight. And we are continuing to spend on projects like Stonebridge.
Thank you. Mary O'Connor.
There's so much wrong with the interpretation of this. First of all, it is true that we have a high amount of TIF debt. Monona is a city that is completely surrounded by the city of Madison. The only way we can do development is to do redevelopment. And redevelopment is expensive because it's not like a cornfield where you throw up a Costco. It involves lots of sites that have a lot of problems. The riverfront redevelopment had a 5-foot diameter Madison Metro sewer pipe that we had to move. It had a brownfield site. It had buildings with asbestos that we had to take care of. So a lot of it involves borrowing to set up a project so that a developer, it's attractive to a developer to come in and use. And once the project is finished and the TIF goes, it pays back its own cost, because this isn't a cost to the taxpayers. It's paid for by the developers with the increased profit that they make once they develop the site. The other half of our debt is used to support essential city services like buying fire trucks and leaf collection machines, funding road repairs, and replacing inefficient HVAC systems. We can only raise a certain amount of money under state law through tax revenue. There's no way we could purchase these materials if we didn't borrow for it. Similar to the fact that you wouldn't buy, normal people, usually people don't buy a new car with cash, they borrow for it. That's what the city does. Since I've become mayor, we've made a real effort to keep our general obligation capital borrowing low. We've also
Thank
refinanced
you.
some loans to get a better interest rate and increase debt payments to pay off debt more
Thank you.
quickly.
What cuts can be made in 2022 to reduce the budget, Mary O'Connor?
For 2022, to tell you the truth, in terms of the budget, about 85%, the operating budget, there are two budgets. There's the operating budget and there's the capital budget. The capital budget is the money that we borrow for things like TIF, police cars, that type of thing. We generally we try to borrow a little bit less than we pay back because we make quite large debt payments on our debt so that we can pay it off more quickly. Frankly, our most recent borrowing was at 1.18% interest rate. I don't know if you can get much better than that. And the firm that handles our borrowing, they don't buy all of our debt. They go out on the market to sell that debt. That's what happens with that. They sell it on the bond market. For 2021, I have asked our staff to propose 0% increase operating budgets over the operating budget of the year before. So they already have had to make cuts. And Monona has very tight budgets as it is, but they made cuts because they had to cover the cost of increases in utilities and in health insurance payments. Now, maybe we're going to have to do that again in 22, but we need to see what our financial situation is after the pandemic. In 2020, we lost over $400,000 in revenue due to the pandemic that we are counting on to help fund city operations. And I handled that by having a job hiring freeze. We did not hire most of our summer staff. We made a lot of smaller cuts, and that's the kind of thing we're going to have to do again.
Thank you. Christy, go for it.
Yeah, we're going to be recovering from this pandemic for a few years. So it's important that we actually start the cuts now. So like Stonebridge, the optional spending of $350,000 when we are being buried in debt. That for me, I really struggle with that. And then right now at council, we're discussing amending our budget and adding 2 B-cycle stations. As far as other cuts, I think what we need to do is just be a little more proactive and have better planning and foresight. And so when we're undertaking projects, we have to really do the financial analysis. Like with San Damiano, we didn't do proper financial analysis to see what the implications of that purchase are going to be on our city. That's an absolute must. So we need better planning. If I am elected, the first thing I will do is I will make sure we have a financial advisor, because that is going to make a really big difference in a short amount of time if we actually be proactive and making sure that the taxpayers are getting the best results for their money, not someone who's servicing all of our debt. So I think as far as other cuts, boy, we're going to have to really scour the list and look very closely, because there are a lot of things that we're going to be struggling to cover for our payments. But I think getting a better management system in our debt, in our finances, is really going to be critical.
Thank you. Given the diminishment of tax revenue from the decline of Southtown Mall and others who've gone out of business due to COVID, paired with the increased need for revenue to cover increasing expenses and San Damiano, what is your strategy now to generate revenue without increasing taxes on residential property owners? Christy, go for it.
Oh boy. Yeah. We first, in addition to generating revenue, we've got to make some cuts on these optional projects. We can look at some things like adding advertising to our transit system. It's a small step in the right direction. Making sure we are smart in how we develop San Damiano and we embrace public-private partnership there. So it's not the taxpayers paying for that park, because parks are very expensive to maintain. If we're really smart with how we develop that and we do a lot of public engagement, we can make sure that that's not going to be a resource suck for us as taxpayers, and we can actually make it a revenue stream for us. I think that's going to be essential. But wait and see style of leadership absolutely can't happen there. And I'm really worried for the home once we open that park after June 1st, because we have no budget for park maintenance. We have no budget for added policing there. we haven't done the proper financial analysis for that site. So we need to start public engagement immediately and really start looking closely at everything we're spending and get a handle on this debt.
Mary O'Connor.
I guess, first of all, I would just say that it's not true that we don't have a plan for maintenance of the property at San Damiano. We've talked to the Parks Department. They feel that they can handle mowing the lawn and plowing the road there going forward with the staff that they have. We realize that something has to be done. We plan to secure the home right away once we own it. Again, we don't, so we can't do anything about it. And I've never said I'm against a public-private partnership there. But again, this is something that will all be determined by the outcome of the master planning process, which we want to take some time to talk to people, give people a chance to give us their input as to what they would like to see there. In terms of the primary way the city can increase revenues is through redevelopment to increase our tax base. And that's, unfortunately, I know that many people think TIF is a bad thing, but it really isn't. For example, is Pier 37. That was TIF 2, and that district closed a few years ago. It started out, that property was worth about $15 million. When it closed, it was worth $80 million. And the city now is receiving an extra $400,000 in property taxes from that each year that we can use towards city operations. That's money that residents don't have to pay in their tax bill. So that's why we continue to support and fund TIF projects. They pay for themselves over time. And then once the debt is paid off, then we get the benefit of that increased tax revenue.
Thank you. Time now for our closing remarks. You each have a minute and a half. We will go in the opposite order of opening statements. So Christy, go forth. Your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Joy. I think you've seen you have two very different candidates to choose from today. Where do you want us to go? Have you seen a plan presented by my opponent? What is the path forward? Our website says we should only be using TIF in developments that are stalled or wouldn't happen otherwise. But we continue to give out TIF at every project. We've got to, I'm a planner. I set big goals and I achieve them, even when people tell me it's impossible. I'm a communicator who embraces transparency, and I'm not afraid to acknowledge our problems because it's the first step in solving them. We have got to have better processes in place. We've had a lot of costly mistakes due to a lack of planning and oversight. $1 million at the yacht club, Riesling Group, 36,000, Nehemiah, 52,000. Our debt level is one of the highest per capita in Dane County. We've not started the public engagement process at San Damiano, and there's no reason we need to wait. We need to start that immediately. There's already a steering committee. Who's on that committee? I don't know. Are plans being made without our engagement? As taxpayers, we are all the owners of that park, and we need to have a voice and a say in what happens there. When I think about Grand Crossing Park, that started out with $500,000 budget, went to $900,000, and then topped out at a whopping $1.9 million. San Damiano is much bigger. And so this is a very important election. And so I hope you'll go to my website at goforthmonona.com to learn more about my vision for Monona.
Mary O'Connor.
Well, thank you for taking the time today to learn more about my opponent, myself, and the issues facing Monona. If you reelect me as your mayor, these are my priorities. I will make sure that we continue to provide both essential city services and the amenities that make Monona great, our parks, pool, library, and senior services. Sustainability and protecting our lakes will remain a priority, and I will continue our efforts to make walking and biking in Monona a safe experience. All of our residents must feel welcome and included here, so I will continue to prioritize our efforts to expand diversity and inclusiveness in Monona and to work with the City Council, city staff, and the Nehemiah Center to address issues of racism and inequity. Monona must remain an affordable place to live for both families and our senior citizens. To control residential property tax increases, I will encourage redevelopment to increase our tax base. And it is not true that we provide TIF for every development here. I will always follow the fiscally responsible budgeting practices that I'm known for. This election is about experience and competence and telling the truth. We are beginning to see the end of the pandemic, which has had a major impact on city operations and the budget. We have an aging city infrastructure and are making a once-in-a-lifetime investment in green space. The times require a mayor who understands how city government and the budget work and who is willing to work collaboratively with residents, city staff, and the council. Organization, experience, collaboration, and a love of this city are my strengths. I would appreciate your support on April 6th, and please go to maryformonona.com to see my website. Thank you.
Thank you both very much for participating in this Monona Mayoral Candidate Forum, and thanks to the community for participating as well. The next forum in this series will be this afternoon at 3 o'clock, featuring the candidates running for Monona City Council. On behalf of the Monona Community Media, the Monona Eastside Business Alliance, and the League of Women Voters of Dane County, I'm Joy Cardine. Please make a plan to vote